Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So in today's video I wanted to show you this really cute and easy beginner friendly fluffy fairy bag. You can use a bunch of scrap yarn for this project and you also just need a slicker brush. So let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so for this project you're going to need a selection of yarn. I've got a bunch of scrap yarn and then I have some kind of larger skeins. However, this is still a scrap yarn project. I just kind of gathered some random colours that I wanted to use. But all in all, you'll probably need anywhere between 100 to 150 grams of yarn in total. So as long as you have a bunch of scrap pieces or kind of one larger skein and then a bunch of scrap pieces, then that should be fine. I'm going to be using this yarn for my kind of main part of the bag, and then my scrap pieces are going to be, these extra pieces are going to be the colour changes. So this is my main sort of colour. This is the B&M Chunky Deluxe Spot knitting yarn and I've got 100 grams of this. However, I don't think that I will need to use all of this because I'm going to be obviously using these other colours. And then I've just got some light green, baby pink, another lighter baby pink, some kind of light blue, mint green, and some lilac. And I may add some others in, but these are the kind of ones that I grabbed for the time being. I wanted to use kind of the fairy-esque type colours, so I've got lots of pastels, pinks, purples, greens. Obviously you can use any colours you want. So for today's project I'm going to be using a 3mm hook, which is definitely smaller than the one that I would normally recommend, but because we're going to be brushing out the yarn or like the fabric as it's crocheted, it is going to stretch. So you can afford to use a smaller hook and a tighter tension because you are going to be basically stretching out the yarn. It's going to kind of thin out the density of the project. So I highly recommend using a smaller hook than you would normally use. I've also got some scissors, a stitch marker, and this is optional, but I've also got a sewing needle just in case I need to sew in any ends, but you can also use your hook as well. Okay, so the last thing you're going to need, and this is the most important thing to make your bag fluffy, is a slicker brush. This is just a dog slicker brush. I got this from Pets at Home. I think it was like £5, I can't remember, but you can get these pretty much at any pet shop or like on Amazon. They're pretty affordable, and I've just got a smaller one, but you can get really big ones as well. And I also highly recommend that you brush your project on some sort of surface that either you don't mind scratching, or you can put something down like a mat that is going to protect the surface underneath it, because the slicker brush has very spiky metal like prongs and it is going to scratch whatever surface you use. I'm going to be using some sort of like scoring mat that I have, but even like cardboard should work fine, or some sort of like plastic surface that you don't mind it's sort of scratching against. The other thing I wanted to add is that obviously the work is going to stretch, but you need to account for this. So when we are going to make the project, we are going to be making it technically smaller than we want it to actually be, because the work is going to expand in width and in height after we brush it out. So the work will typically expand about 3.5 centimeters bigger than the original piece. So you always want to make sure that you're making the bag slightly less than how you actually want it to come out. So I just wanted to give you an example of how it was going to look when it is brushed out, so you can kind of decide what colours you want to use. This is a bookmark that I made a while back, and it has a couple of colour changes. So it has blue and white, and I just made this kind of like checkerboard colour. So this is what it looks like when it is brushed out. As you can see, it's definitely a little bit more kind of stretchier because I brushed it out. It was more compact before. So this is how the colours look. They kind of have a more hazy like feel to them, which is what I really like about it. So just to show you the comparison, this is what it looks like when it is normally crocheted, so without brushing, and this is what it looks like when you brush it out. So before you start, you just want to kind of measure out exactly how long or wide you want the bag to be. So this is going to be like the width section. So I want my bag to be maybe between 30 to 31 centimeters. So consider which width you want your final product to be, and then you want to minus about 3.5 centimeters from that. so that's about 27. So about 30.5 minus 3.5 is about 27. So I'm going to be making the kind of width across of my bag 27 centimeters, which means that basically I'm going to do any amount of rows that eventually reaches 27 centimeters. So this bag is fully customizable to any length and width that you want. So just measure that out and then consider afterwards that it will stretch 3.5 centimeters wider. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a chain that equals the width of the base of the bag. So this isn't going to be the width of the bag in total, this is just going to be kind of like the depth that the bag, the base of the bag is. So make more or less chains depending on if you want the base of the bag to be smaller or longer, but I'm going to do 10 chains. So I'm going to make a slip knot, and I'm going to place the slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to make 10 chains. Okay, so this is going to be the base width of the bag, and I'm going to start off by just making one single crochet into the second back bump from the hook. So I'm going to flip the chain over. You'll notice the back bumps, and I'm going into that second back bump, so that's this one right here, and I'm going to make a single crochet into that back bump. And remember, it's okay to use a tighter tension because the bag is going to stretch after we brush it out. Even if this means that your work is curling, don't worry about it because it's going to even out after you brush it out. So I'm going to make one single crochet into the next back bump, and then into each back bump all the way across. So that should leave you with 9 single crochets. Okay, so that's what it should be looking like so far. So now I'm going to start my next row. I'm just going to simply turn my work around and make one single crochet into each stitch all the way around. So I'm going into my first stitch, single crochet, so that's one, into the next stitch, single crochet, and then into each stitch all the way across, one single crochet in each. Okay. So from this point forward, you're just going to want to repeat the second row until it reaches the actual width of the bag that you want it to be. So I'm going to continue these rows until I have 27 centimeters worth of work. So again, I will just turn the work and I'll make one single crochet into each stitch all the way across. So I'm going to repeat that row until I have 27 centimeters. So I will meet you back when I've done that. Okay, so I've just completed all of the rows. I did 58 rows to get 27 centimeters, and now I'm going to be starting the circular kind of base section. So we're going to be crocheting all the way down around the bottom and all the way back up, and we're going to be making increased stitches at each corner. So since I am at a corner stitch, I'm going to make another single crochet into that stitch. Okay. So that's 2 single crochets in the corner, and I'm going to be placing my stitch marker into the second to last one. So not the one that we just made, but the second one next to it. That's going to mark the beginning of our round. And then for the edges, I'm going to be doing slip stitches. So the corners are always going to be single crochets, and the edges are going to be slip stitches. So I'm going into sort of the next gap. So can you see these kind of holes right here? I'm going into the next sort of side hole and making a slip stitch. And then into the next one, slip stitch. Into the next one, slip stitch. Into the next one, slip stitch. And I'm going to go all the way down making slip stitches, and when I reach this bottom corner I'll make 2 single crochets. So I'm going to meet you back at this corner So I can kind of recap with you the corner section, and then I will continue the rest of it afterwards. Okay, so I've just reached the corner, and now I'm going to do my 2 single crochets into that bottom stitch. So that's 1, that's 2, and then I'm going to slip stitch all the way across, and then into that very last corner stitch I'll do another 2 single crochets. So I'm just slip stitching now to each stitch. Now I'm going to do my 2 single crochets into this corner stitch. Okay, and then I'm going to slip stitch all the way up to this edge, and then when I get to the top corner stitch I'll make another 2 single crochets, and then I'm going to slip stitch all the way across until I reach the stitch marker. So I will slip stitch into that stitch marker space, and then I'm going to replace the stitch marker in that stitch. So I'll meet you back once I hit the stitch marker, and then we'll move on to the next round. Okay, so I've just finished my slip stitch and corner stitch row, and now I'm going to be actually starting the main bulk of the bag. So you're just going to want to kind of measure exactly how tall you want your bag to be. So technically the base will fold in half, so your height of your bag is going to be sort of from 1/2 of the base upwards. So I want my bag to be roughly about 20 centimeters in height, so I'm going to basically be doing continuous rows until the bag reaches about 1/2 of that, so about 10 centimeters in height, and then I'm going to do a decrease row. So for the time being I'm going to do continuous rows for about 10 centimeters. This might be different for you though if you want your bag a different height. But the continuous rows is literally just going to be single crochet. Now this row might be a little bit more difficult because the stitches are quite tight, so just take your time, but I'm just going into each stitch and making a single crochet. Just kind of have to be careful and push your hook through. I'm just going into each stitch making single crochets. Okay, so I've just finished my row of single crochet, and now I'm going to, like I said, continue doing rows of single crochet until I reach about 1/2 of the height that I want my bag to be. And at this point I'm just going to be randomly changing colours. I'm not really doing it in a specific order because the whole point of the bag is for it to kind of have random speckles of colour. So you can change the order that I'm doing it in if you want kind of a different colour variation, but I'm just going to grab my first colour, so I'm just going to grab purple. And I'm going to start off by doing a few single crochets in my original colour, so I don't know, maybe like 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and then I'm just going to cut the yarn, leaving a tail. And I'm going to tie my purple yarn around the white yarn and then pull tight, and then I'm going to pull the white yarn around the purple yarn and make a knot again. So I've got like 2 knots, and then just kind of pull both to tighten the knot. Make sure everything is tight, and then I'm going to cut those little pieces, and this just helps to kind of seamlessly colour change. So now I'm just going to single crochet along for a few more stitches until I'm happy with how many purple stitches I have. So now I'm happy with how many purple stitches I've done. I'm going to cut the purple yarn and I'm going to attach my original colour back on. So I'm just going to tie the white around the purple, pull tight, and then pull the purple around the white, pull tight, make sure everything is nice and tight. And then cutting those short pieces, and then I'm going to continue making single crochets for a few more stitches. Okay, so I'm just going to cut the white yarn, and now I'm going to attach my green yarn. And like I said, this is literally just random. And then I'm just going to make single crochets along until I'm happy with how many green stitches there are. So I'm just going to kind of continue this all the way around, changing colours kind of just randomly, and then I'm going to do rows and rows and rows of just single crochets until I have 10 centimeters of work. So I'm going to meet you back when that is all done. Okay, so I've reached the point where my work has reached about 10 centimeters, so I'm now going to do the decrease row. Now the decrease row might look a little bit differently for you, but the same rough principle applies. So you're essentially just going to want to make a bunch of skips. So basically you would do a selection of single crochets and then you would just skip a stitch, and then another selection of single crochets and skip a stitch. Now you want to try and make sure that the skips that you are doing are consistent. So let's say you skip every 8th stitch, and you're just going to kind of want to work out roughly how many stitches you have in your round. By this point I've got 122, but your number might be different, so I'm just going to try and find a number that is roughly divisible by 122. So I'm going to go with 6, and that is roughly about 20. So obviously it is not the exact number, but it's fine because it isn't really going to make a difference to the pattern. You just want to make sure that you are decreasing in some way. So essentially I'm going to be doing 5 single crochets and then I'm going to skip every 6th. So I'm just going to go to my next stitch, single crochet, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and 5, and then I'm going to skip my 6th one and just start single crocheting into the next stitch. So now I've started my sequence again, so that's my first, that's my second, that's my third, fourth and fifth, and then I'm going to skip the next stitch and do another 5 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then I would just skip another stitch and do another 5 single crochets. So that's going to be my sequence. Your sequence might be different, and I know by the time I get to the end of the round I'm going to have a few stitches left that don't go into the sequence because my number doesn't technically divide exactly by 6. But it doesn't really matter as long as you kind of roughly do a sequence, and then even if it just means you have like 10 stitches left at the end and you just single crochet into them, you just want to make sure that the bag is now starting to kind of round upwards rather than continue kind of in this shape. We want to kind of make it a little bit more circular. So, you know, if you have 80 stitches, you might want to do a decrease every 8th stitch, which means that you would just basically do 7 single crochets and then skip on the 8th, 7 single crochets, skip on the 8th, and that means that you would be minusing 10 stitches in total from your round. You know, even if you had 82 stitches, you could still kind of do that sequence. You would just have like 2 stitches left at the end that wouldn't really fit in. You could just do the last 2 single crochets as they are. I hope that makes sense. My point is, this doesn't have to be perfect and exact. You just want to make sure that you are doing like a round of decreasing. So I'm going to continue my sequence, crocheting 5 single crochets and then skipping a stitch, repeating that all the way around. And then I'm going to continue on my pattern as normal. I'm going to basically do my last 10 centimeters as I was over here, just literally single crochets, changing colors whenever I want to. So I'm going to do another 10 centimeters and then I'm going to show you the next step. Okay, so I've now finished all of my rows. I've reached 20 centimeters, so now I'm going to fasten off. So at the very last stitch, I'm just going to make a slip stitch into the next stitch with the yarn that I've got. So I'm just going to insert my hook and make a slip stitch like that. And I'm going to chain 1 and cut the yarn. Like that. And just pull tight. And then I'm going to remove my stitch marker and I'm going to basically place it where the center stitch is on the side of the bag. So you're just going to want to kind of find that center stitch right on the side. That's this one right here. I'm just going to want to mark it with a stitch marker, and this is going to mark the middle, and then you can decide how thick you want your strap to be based on this stitch marker being the center point. So if you want to start further out, your strap is going to be wider. If you're going to start further in towards the stitch marker, your strap is going to be thinner. So I'm going to take my colour of yarn, I'm just using cream for this, you can use any colour you want, and the same principle applies with the section down here. You can change colours wherever you want, but the same pattern is still applies. So I'm going to do about 7 stitches either side of the stitch marker, so I'm going to count. Because I'm left-handed, I'll be counting this way and then working this side to this side. If you're right-handed, you can count to the right and then attach your yarn at the right side and work across that way. So I'm going to count from the stitch marker 7 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to insert my hook into the 7th stitch and I'm going to pull my yarn through and then chain 1 to attach it. And then I'm just going to make 7 single crochets all the way across, so going into the same stitch that I'm in, single crochet, into the next stitch, single crochet, into the next stitch, single crochet, 3, to the next stitch, 4, to the next stitch, 5, next stitch, 6, and next stitch 7. Okay, so now I've reached the stitch marker, I'm going to make a single crochet into that stitch marker stitch, which is going to be like the midpoint, so that's technically 8, and then to even it out I'm going to do another 7 single crochets, so you should have 7, 1 and 7, so technically altogether 15, or your number might be different. I'm going to do another 7 single crochets, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so essentially the strap is literally just going to be rows and rows of single crochet now all the way up, so technically I'm going to be just doing rows and rows of 15 single crochets, changing colour where I want, and I will just be turning the work at the end of the row, so I'll just turn the work around and work single crochets all the way across, and then turn the work again and work back and forward until I'm happy with the length. So I'm just going to continue making rows and rows of single crochet, and I'm going to change colours at random places just like I did down here, and then I'm going to come back once I have reached the strap length that I want. If you want a longer strap, then obviously continue to make more rows. If you want it much shorter, then make less rows. So I've just completed my last row and the strap is at the length I want it, and feel free to make the strap slightly shorter than you want it because it will stretch anyway when we brush it out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to be fastening off, and I'm going to leave a long tail for sewing. If you don't want to sew, you could also single crochet or slip stitch the strap to the other side, but I just think that sewing is a little bit more secure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chain 1 and then cut the yarn, and I'm going to leave a long tail. Okay, and then I'm just going to sew this side to this side. So if you need to use the stitch marker to mark out the middle stitch and then basically work out where the beginning of the strap will be sewn. So 7, for me that was 7 stitches back, and then I'll sew across and then another 7 stitches this side to make sure that it is perfectly lined up. So I'm going to do that now off camera, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how we brush out the yarn. Okay, so now is the exciting part where we get to brush out the bag. So this is what it's looking like before we brush it out. Obviously you don't have to brush your bag out, this still looks very cute as it is, but I want to show you a technique that is really good if you don't have fluffy yarn but you want to make your projects fluffy and keep them nice and strong as well. So I've got my slicker brush and I'm simply just going to brush from right to left gently, and I'm not kind of trying to pull too much. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and work my way up, but you just want to gently brush the bag. So this is what it looks like when everything is nice and brushed out. I decided to not brush out the inside because I wanted to keep that nice and strong. So I've only brushed the outside and the strap. As you can see, it's nice and fluffy, and the more you brush it, the more kind of hazy the colours come out. As you can see on the inside, that is a big difference, and I'm really happy with how this came out, so I'm going to kind of give you a final reveal. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. I hope you all enjoyed this cute tutorial, and if you have any suggestions of what you want me to make next, then leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.